Good morning. Why startups fail? So whatever I'm going to tell you isn't new. It's not something that you haven't heard of before or you can't Google and find, right? So what I'm going to do is just to make sure that this is interesting and interactive, primarily to ensure that you don't go off to sleep thanks to my boring monologue, and more importantly, I don't go off to sleep because of the silence, right? So what we'll try and keep this as interactive as possible, and I'd encourage you to do that. Is that okay? Yes? Can't say, won't say, none of the above, all the above, some, what? Yes? Yes. Works for you guys? Yeah? Because that's the only way it will work for me. Okay? So please, to ensure that we have a dialogue, let's do that. Great? Okay, so why do startups fail? Right? And the warning, like I said, there's nothing new out here. But anyway, so many reasons, right? Why startups fail, and we can all sort of easily attest to many of the reasons. What's the number one reason? People. So what does it mean?
So the team,
the owners give up.
The owners give up. Is that the reason?
You got not great co-founders or staff.
Yeah. What else?
The fault with the right skills.
What's that?
They don't have the right skills.
They don't have the right skills.
Lack of drive.
Lack of drive. What else?
Mind frame of people and
Mind frame of people.
Arguments.
Arguments. Knowledge.
They're not able to mobilize the right people.
Essentially, you're saying right people, competence, knowledge, right mind frame, all of that. All of that is true. What else?
inability to sort of reject what they've learned before in a sense.
So the ability to unlearn doesn't exist. Okay? So let me just tell you. I'll just run through this, right? So my whole purpose here, we have an hour and a half. I want to be able to wrap this up, right? And ensure that thereafter we have, a conversation, so that when we leave the room, we are significantly, better informed and more aware than when we entered, right? So who's the buck stops here leader? We're all founders, fresh out of college, right? All excited. Let's do a startup, and we all jump into it. Who's the CEO? Ever thought about that? How do you know who's the CEO? Why is somebody the CEO? Just because he or she likes to dress formally, go out and pitch? The geeky, techie guy is never the CEO? Is that the reason? Right? So who's the CEO in your company? Just because you're the founder, you become the CEO? What would you look for? Why is somebody the CEO? Let's say 2 or 3 or 4 of you, get together, start a company. How do you really decide who the CEO is? The oldest guy? Who? Right? Very important thing, because the buck must stop at a particular desk. It's all very well to say, we are democratic, consensus-based decision making, all those other nice things. But at the end of the day, somebody has to be able to call out a decision and stick by it. Because you're dealing with investors, you're dealing with employees, you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with partners, and a host of other things, especially with employees. When there's conflict resolution, who takes the final call, right? So you need to be very clear about that. And whenever there is this problem, all the other things that you said show up. What's good for the founder, is it always good for the startup? Yes or no? Why not?
It should be. It should be.
It should be? Really? Why?
Because you should have the startup's interests.
So what's good for the founder is good for the startup. So what's good for the startup, is that good for the founder?
yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's always true, right? What's good for a startup is always good for the founder. Why? I own shares in the company does well, I make out like a bandit, right? But what's good only for me need not be good for my company, right? I could be compensated very heavily, I could be treated very differently. My interests can never ever subsume the interest of the company, right? So there's a problem in the startup world. There's an illness. It's called founderitis. Because I'm the founder, I'm the most happening dude in town, I decide, I get compensated. So what's good for me naturally is good for the company, right? So that's called founderitis. It leads to all kinds of emotional problems, leads to conflict, because you see yourself as the company, not realizing that the company is but a vehicle into which a bunch of others have also invested in, either cash or kind, emotional energy, etc., right? Very, very important thing. I cannot over stress this fact. If the chemistry is not right, the arithmetic never ever works, right? So what does it mean? That you guys like doing, chemistry experiments in the lab together? What does this mean? When the chips are down, who can you count on? This is a super high pressure environment, right? No resources, you have payroll to meet, you've got a week to rustle up the money, the board is really upset with you, customers aren't paying, the product is way behind schedule, and then your founder or your partner says, you know what, things ain't working out for me, I'm heading home, nice knowing you, right? So what's the kind of person you want around you? So there's a very nice apocryphal tale about this small commando team led by this commander, 5-person team, out on a mission to take that big fort. Middle of the night, the commander is woken up by one of his commandos and says, we are surrounded on all sides, what do we do? He says, you know what, we can now attack on all sides, right? You want that attitude, you want that spirit, the desire to go out there and make things happen rather than allow circumstances to overwhelm you. You want that kind of a person. You want somebody who resonates with your worldview. You want somebody who's willing to go that extra mile. You can't say, you know what, this is not my job. I was hired to be the marketing person, not to make sure if the water cooler is working, right? In the early days of Yahoo, when the roof was leaking, engineers brought buckets to work, right? They slept in the cubicles. They were working 22, 23 hours a day. They showered in office. That's attitude. You understand? Not saying, hey, you know what, I'm entitled to my perks, right? I want my cafe mocha with whatever. If I don't get it, I can't code. You understand what I'm saying? You need to be able to understand what it means to be in a startup. Loyalty and competence are not substitutes. So who will you hire? Somebody who's very loyal to you or somebody who's competent? They're not fungible assets, right? So when you hire wrong people and you promote wrong people, you're essentially reducing the overall IQ of the company, right? Because the good folks will leave because they don't see a path for themselves, right? So who would you want to around you? Somebody who's really loyal and says, you know, boss, you're just awesome, right? And you show up and say, yeah, I'm awesome. And then you take a selfie, put it up on Facebook, and 20 of the loyal dudes like, right? So what do you want? You want somebody to challenge you, somebody who's competent, capable, knowledgeable, experienced, right? And all this goes back to the core of who you are as an entrepreneur. Why are you doing what you are doing? You know what? Severe pressure, I just need to hire. Investors, you know, my product is behind you, I just need to hire. Expediency over capability, right? So for a short-term satisfaction or a satisficing approach, you're essentially mortgaging the company, right? If you read about all the great entrepreneurs, they spend about 60 to 70% of their time hiring, right out there in front of the best people. You've all heard of Steve Jobs, I presume. So one of the most classic tales was of Jobs hiring a guy called John Scully. Everyone knows that story? You've heard of John Scully? Perhaps, you know, before your time. John Scully used to be the vice president at Pepsi worldwide. And he was 41 years old when a 26-year-old Steve Jobs goes to him and says, you know what, I want you to join Apple. The guy's, John Sculley is blown out of his mind. So what are you talking about? Small, tiny, no-name startup, Silicon Valley. Here I am, Pepsi, big, New York-based, global giant. How dare you talk to me like this? And Jobs tells him, you know what, do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want to come and change the world? Right? And he walks out. And this resonates in Scully's mind. Okay? And he just can't sleep. And he asks himself, what the heck am I doing here? And he joins Apple as the president. Read a fabulous book called Odyssey, From Pepsi to Apple by John Sculley. And you'll understand how important it is to hire the right people and how to hire them and how to go after people who you desperately want for your company. You know, the arrogance of ignorance, right, it's a very common trait, a very common behavioral attribute that you will see. I don't know, I think I know, and therefore I'm going to act and throw my weight around, not realizing that you've been gifted with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you need to be using things in that proportion, right? Learn to listen, be humble, be confident, don't be arrogant. What does it mean? It means that your ability to listen goes down when you have the arrogance of ignorance. If you know how much you don't know, you're awesome, right? When you don't know how much you don't know, that's when you exhibit this kind of behavior. When you live in your own small cocoon and you think you have it all, you have all the answers to the world's problems, you know exactly how to solve world peace and world hunger, that's when you have this problem, right? So there's a very thin line between confidence and arrogance. Confidence means you're humble and you have to have the ability to learn and listen and not be blown away just because somebody says something to you that's contrary to your beliefs. Arrogance is when you stop listening and you think you have all the answers and everybody else needs to now listen to you, right? When you start exhibiting such things, you clearly know that you're on a very, very slippery downward path. Very few startups focus on this, the soft infrastructure. You're worried about your office, you're worried about the coffee machine, you're worried about, you know, the chef, you're worried about all kinds of, you know, interiors and, you know, all stuff like that. Focus on things like the soft infrastructure. What's the culture of the company? Are you walking the talk? How important are value systems to you? Integrity to you? What do you do? Right? What are the processes in the company that essentially reinforce all of these? The attitudes, the value systems, the culture, all of that. Have you surrounded yourself by people who essentially reinforce the company's objective and mission? Do you have advocates who will give you what is called the credibility through association? You're a tiny startup, nobody knows you, nobody wants to know you. You have zero credibility. You think you have it, but you don't. How do you generate credibility around you? By surrounding yourself by people who are more credible than you are, who become the advocates, who become the mentors, right? Why should they hang out with you? Thought about it? What will you tell them? That they should, you know what, come and just hug you with joy, right? These are the important things that you have to spend time pondering over. And when you don't, you start having all kinds of people-related problems. Because remember, a feature is not a product. A product is not a business. A business is not a company. And a company is not an organization. You understand? An organization is something that transcends time, that transcends the immediate. When you meet somebody from a nice, big, well-known company, so you know what? This guy is a Tesco guy, this guy is a Vodafone guy, this guy is a GE guy, this guy is a Google guy, whatever, right? When you start hearing that, then you start realizing that a particular organizational culture is being built. Even after 20 years, you meet somebody and you know what? He behaves exactly like a Google guy, right? So there's a certain cultural aspect of behavior, of attitude, the way you look at things, the way you interact with people, your problem-solving ability, your awareness. all of those things get manifested in this thing called culture. And an organization is one that has the culture. Lots of companies remain companies. Very, very few people make the transition from a business to a company, right? Number 2, marketing, kind of related. If I ask you, right, in your startup, do you know who you're selling to? If you say anybody with a pulse, it's probably the wrong answer, right? So do you know who you're selling to? You have to be really clear about it. Because if you don't know who you're selling to, anybody and everybody is potentially, according to you at least, your customer. So then you have what's called the spray and pray approach. Right? I really don't know, so I'm going to come with a shotgun and generally fire and, well, let's see who's left standing. Okay? So very, very important. If you don't know this, don't do your startup. Or at least have the mindset that gets you to answering this question sooner than later. What the hell are you selling? Right? Why should people buy? Have you thought about it? Have you heard of the phrase called a value proposition? You have? What's a value proposition? Yeah.
So, from the customer's point of view, something that they find valuable to their need, or something that they find adds value to the existing thing.
My God, I didn't understand that. Anyone wants to elaborate? What the heck is this? Yeah.
It's what differentiates your product from other competitors.
I'll throw one more jargon at you. Competitive advantage. That's what it is. What's value proposition?
How do you add value? What extra thing you are giving to a person is something that...
Value proposition is something what we are offering to a customer who is going to pay us.
You're offering something to a customer who's going to pay you. All right? That could be anything, right? What else?
A proposition that has scalability for the customer.
A proposition that?
That has utility for the customer, tangible or intangible.
Yeah, but that's kind of like a super subset.
Scalability and potential of growth.
No.
So that differentiates from the customer?
Sorry?
So that differentiates you from your...
That's what he said, differentiates you from the customer, yeah.
Is it just like it's a product, service, or something that you've got that's interesting for customers? Like,
That's interesting for customers.
Is it what you perceive or assume to add value to?
Yeah, so all of us, have you observed, are using jargon, right? Add value. What the hell does add value mean?
How do you solve a problem for the
How do you solve a problem, all right? Now we are getting someplace.
So any proposition that customer is willing to exchange for something?
It's a promise of value to be delivered.
Yeah, so don't use the word value.
Which reduces customer's pain.
No, I'm saying, you see, you don't learn swimming reading books, right? Cut to the chase. What's that? If imagine I'm your customer, right? I should buy your product because fill in the blank.
Pain point.
it's the best product in the market.
Because you have to tell me the because, not
That's the proposition.
exactly. Do you understand? Because it will save you 50% of your time at 30% of the cost with zero customer service problems and blah blah blah. You get the point? That is value proposition. Rest is stories. In a startup, learn to focus. Don't get lost in these jumble of words which are entirely meaningless. They look good in a paper, horrible in the real world. Right? Can you write, for each one of you guys who are doing your own company, can you write that one line? Right? You should buy my product because. Just fill in the blank. And then test it with a customer. Guys are, ooh, that sounds like you're selling me something else. Right? New age stuff. Right? So, and the real issue here is this. And I do this better than anybody else because. Right? That is value proposition. And it's not just restricted to a customer. As a startup, you're embedded in a market. You deal with a partner, you deal with a supplier, right? You deal with a channel agent, whatever. Each one of those guys must see a value proposition in you, else they will not hang out with you, and therefore there will be people who are not co-opted into your story and hence will not work hard to make you win. You understand? You cannot win at somebody else's expense. You have to have the ability to co-opt everybody else. Why does my supplier win? Because I'm going to keep buying more and more from him. Why will I keep buying more and more from him? Because, hey, you know what? I'm going to be selling more. Why will I be selling more? Because I'm solving a problem better, faster, cheaper than somebody else. And why will my channel partner hug me with joy when the next time I bump into him? You get the point? You need to be able to answer that. Very, 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 very important thing. All entrepreneurs learn to focus on big markets. And those markets have to be growing. Tell me why. Why do you want a market to be big?
You can easily scale up.
Tell me why. Let's say cement market worldwide is huge, right? You think a startup will jump in there?
You're not going to be able to target every single person in that market. So if you go for a big market and you get 50%, then at least you've still got 50% of something big as opposed to 50% of something tiny. And also if it grows, then your percentage of the market also grows.
Yeah, so that's, let me just give you some venture capital perspective on this, right? Why do VCs look for big markets? Why do VCs look for fast growing markets? Without these two conditions being met, you'll never get money, right? In any market, you cannot have more than 6 companies, each with more than 15% market share, right? Mathematically impossible, isn't it? That's the first point to keep in mind. Second, in any mature steady state market, the top 5-7 players typically end up with something like between 50 and 60% market share. The rest of the lot, let's say from number 7 to 5,863, are fighting for the remaining 30-40%. So even if you're the 5,863rd company, and if it's a massive market, you still have the opportunity of creating some value for me as the investor. You get the point? Question is, can you be a $100 million company, let's say, even if you're number 5863? That requires the market to be able to support a company at least of that size, even if you're last in line, right? And that's why it's very important. Else, what's the point? 2, it should be fast growing. Why should it be fast growing?
It shows that when there's a sort of the set of waves analogy, I think previously that if it's a growing market, you're probably hitting it at the correct time.
You're hitting the correct wave in a growing market? Yeah, sort of. The important thing is that if the market is growing very fast, like 100% per year kind of thing, incumbents are easily dislodgeable. Why? Because they have the legacy of incumbency, the baggage of the past. They cannot let go of what they were doing. And it's like this huge aircraft carrier that has to turn 1 degree, right? It'll take forever. But a young, fast-moving speedboat startup can turn on a dime and move really fast and do stuff that the giant corporation wants to do but can't, because unless they have a strategy meeting and a white paper, right, and 26 committees approving it, things just won't happen, right? So keep this in mind as a startup. If you're targeting a small market, if you're targeting a non-growing or a slow-growing market, get the hell out.
So is that true that all fast-growing markets are easy to penetrate into? Is it
and large markets.
Large markets.
I'm not saying easy to penetrate. They're amenable for young startup to get into, right? There are a bunch of other things that have to be also done. For example, you must have something worthwhile to offer. You could be very early in a market. There used to be a company called Go Corporation. Have you heard of this company? I think this company probably gave rise to the most number of entrepreneurs and startup CEOs than any other company. The company was called Go. They were the first guys to come out with what was then called a PDA, and is now iPad, etc., right? Handwriting recognition, all the other cool stuff that we see today, right? They'd also worked on a touch screen monitor. This is all done in the late 80s, early 90s. They were too early for the market. Market just wasn't ready for it. Costs, distribution, software bugs, training, consumer acceptance, etc. You could also be too late. For example, if somebody shows up and says, I think I'm going to do a e-commerce startup, right? Because I figured out this unique niche of people who love, flowers delivered only on Monday mornings. I think I'm going to cater to their interest, right? Unlikely that you'll ever make much headway. You understand? So you can be very late. So the question therefore is, how do you time your entry into a market? And obviously there is no easy answer, right? And hence the need for every entrepreneur to be embedded deeply within a market itself. Another colossal reason for companies to fail, when you start believing your own PR, right? That's the beginning of the end, right? PR is meant for somebody else to consume. Others must think you're great. If you start thinking you're awesome and start behaving like one, then there's a serious problem, right? PR is intended to create awareness about what is it that you're offering, the reason for your existence, and generate some consumer interest, right? It's not intended for you to start walking on water. This is obvious. Too removed from customers. I know several startup CEOs who never met a customer. They were so consumed in building the product. They were so consumed in giving interviews and appearing on the cover of the latest startup glam magazine, right? Too consumed blogging. Too consumed with Facebook likes. Have never met a real person in their lives. Okay? All these are classic problems, let me tell you that. I'm not making anything up. Do you understand the lay of the land? Meaning, who's the competition? Right? Classic question. For example, right? Nokia is the world's largest camera maker. Old story. But this has been repeated over the last 100 years. The same problem of not recognizing who your competition is. Okay? I mean, there's an old story, right, about what used to happen in New York and London at the turn of the last century, the 19th to 20th century. You had horse-drawn carriages, right, essentially ferrying people across the city. And the weather being what it was, and the snow and everything else, the city was a mess with the horse manure and all the rest of it. So the city was just extremely agitated, having to deal with the mess. That as more and more people were pouring into cities, more horse-drawn carriages were deployed, more manure and stuff was getting generated, and they were wondering what the heck to do. Out of the blue emerged the automobile. Silently emerged. Nobody knew that this is making an entry. And in 10 years, horse-drawn carriages disappeared. Right? So there was something called the Red Flag Act. You can look it up. Right? How will you acquire customers? We'll do marketing. Right? Easiest thing in the world to blow money on and to make a marketing agency rich. Right? And they'll tell you all kinds of stuff. Right? And they'll throw all kinds of data at you. They'll show you stuff from Ad Age. They'll throw you stuff from the latest SEO metrics, all the other cool stuff. So if you aren't savvy, it's very easy to blow up lots of money on this. You know what? I think we need to have a newspaper ad or a TV ad, or let's do a YouTube video. It'll go viral, you know what? And then we'll be all rolling in money. Right? So understand who your customer is, what the value proposition is, what is it you're offering, why are you better, why do you deserve to exist, if you want to take the conversation to a philosophical level. Okay, you need to be able to answer that. Again, something that most startups ignore. Build it, they will come. Right, is a common thing. I built an awesome product, only the damn customer doesn't get it. It's really dumb, you know. They don't understand. Nobody understands. My investors don't get it, employees don't get it, my partners don't get it, suppliers don't get it. Okay, nobody gets it. Maybe it doesn't need to be gotten. Okay, never externalize this. Very, very, very important. Okay, nothing happens in any company till sales happens. The most important message of today is this, because everything, it kind of rides on top of all the other trends in the company. If you don't have customers, you're doing something really bad or really wrong. And there's a reason why you don't have customers. So rather than externalizing the problem and saying the world doesn't understand my greatness and genius, maybe it's time to look inside you and say, you know what, maybe I'm not all that happening a dude, right? So you need to understand that. And everybody in the company has to sell. Everyone, every employee. Because who are you selling to? You're selling to the board, you're selling to investors, you're selling to potential hires, right? You found a really fantastic individual that you want on your team, you're selling your company or vision to that person, correct? You're selling to partners, you're selling to suppliers, you're selling to everybody. And selling is not the used car salesman analogy. Selling is your vision. Why this is a fantastic opportunity, why this is a great business that you're in, why you're going to knock the socks off everybody, correct? Not in a PR-ish way, but coming out of conviction, coming out of knowledge, coming out of experience, coming out of data. You understand? That is what real selling is. Not in sort of smooth talking somebody or schmoozing somebody and enabling them, you know, to part with their money. That'll probably last a few weeks and then you're dead. Goes back to the earlier point, right? Who's buying? Timing is crucial, right? A lot of people come, you know what, I've got this really cool app, right? Fantastic app. You know, it'll just transform the way people live, okay? So how are you going to get it into the phones of your customers? No problem. I'll just go and do a deal with Vodafone. And guess what? Sooner than later, millions of handsets will have my app, yeah? Now imagine you are Vodafone. Startup number 4 million is coming to you and telling you the same thing that he's heard, you know, all the previous millions of times. It takes at a minimum about 12 months to get a telecom service provider to look at you. Okay, so if you don't understand the dynamics of a market and you make up and you put up a business plan or a pitch presentation that says, you know what, my customers are all these large enterprises, and guess what, 2 months later they're buying from me, right? So you'll be laughed out of the room. Why? Because you don't know what the heck you're talking about. You understand? So understanding this is crucial. Understanding the importance of timing, understanding what a sales cycle time means. All of these are crucial. So you'll spend all your waking hours, all your marketing money, all your energy in knocking on a door that will just not open for you. So if you're not smart enough, you're heading to the path of damnation. We talked of that. What are the moats? What does this mean? This is a cooler way of the jargon that you used. Competitive advantage, your differentiation. How do I protect myself? Right? As a startup, you're a small little fort that you have kind of crafted for yourself. You need to have a moat around it, right? Otherwise, before long, the big boys will come and say, you know what, you're done. So what is it that you have that will prevent, because the moment you enter a market, everybody knows you exist, right? And they know what your selling strategy is. They know who you've partnered with. They know what your pricing is. They know what the product features and capabilities is. What do you do? What's your sales approach? This is another piece of jargon, right? That all good B school guys learn. Doesn't work, right? You've heard this phrase, scalable. What the heck does scalable mean? You're the guy who was using scalable.
Business expansion.
Business expansion. Then why not just say expansion? Why scalable?
This is why
you sell more is scalable? What is scalable?
Wide users.
What's that?
Wide user base.
Why the user pays?
Wide user base.
Wide user base is scalable. What is scalable?
Is it
Removing bottlenecks in your company that will stop you being able to grow.
Removing bottlenecks. There's a nice tale, that I've yet to see a bottle where the bottleneck's not at the top.
Being in perpetual business.
Yeah. Bring in perpetual business. That's like what? The fifth law of thermodynamics. Perpetual machine, yeah.
Sort of attempting to do precisely what you do at your current stage, but at 10 times larger or 100 times larger.
Okay.
I was just going to say something to the other one where it's like having processes and enough efficiency in what you're doing.
That's it. That is scalable. Scalable is a company attribute. It's not a functional attribute. Meaning, everything in the company, the people. For example, you'll find you're selling a lot, but somehow your management team is unable to keep pace. They don't understand how, it's like what's called, drinking from a fire hose. Right? A lot of good stuff is happening, you don't know how to handle it. So your people, your processes, your technology, right? Your partnership management, every single element in your business model has to be able to grow and scale. Else you hit that bottleneck thing. That there's just, because the chain is only as strong as its weakest link, right? And then sooner or later you're done. So the important thing is to understand that, and hence calibrating the growth of the company is crucial. How fast should I grow? How soon should I bring on board a management team that knows how to handle this side of it? For example, operations, customer service, right? I've never done customer service. I've never hired anybody older than me. So how the heck do I evaluate these people, right? All of a sudden you brought on board people and you don't know how to handle them. So all of these are elements of scalability that is built into the DNA of a company. And soon it becomes part of the soft infrastructure that we talked of earlier. Do you understand what unit economics means? Yeah? What?
Like the cost per user, monthly active users, things like that.
Yeah. In other words, for 1 unit of customer or 1 unit of product, right? How much money do I make? And when does this money that I make actually start becoming attractive enough such that I continue to do it? What is the cost of acquiring a customer? 1 customer. Start with always that first unit of 1. Right? It's all very well for us to turn around and say, you know what, the market is $49 billion according to various market research reports, which nobody believes in, but pays a lot of good money for. And all I'm saying is I will take just that 1% market share in year 5, right? And then thereafter, I'm vacationing in the Bahamas. So that's kind of the scenario, correct? But that's not the way it happens. Always start ground up with a unit of 1. What will it take for me to acquire 1 customer? What will it take for me to service that 1 customer? How much money will I make from that customer? How much money will I make from that customer over the next several months or a year? Correct? You've heard of this term called LTV in the internet online business world, right? LTV greater than That's it, huh? Cost of customer acquisition, COCA, right? It should be at least 3x. That is an empirical thing, right? It's not a physics law or something. And therefore, that tells you that maybe you're kind of on the right track. Okay? So LTV, all of those who are looking at internet-y type businesses or web businesses or whatever, keep that in mind. Very important. We talked of this. Everybody around you, inside your company, should be winning. Only then you win. Otherwise, everybody will really conspire to kick you out of the market. Right? You find all these cartels and these groups forming, right? So you know what, this guy's disrupting my business. Let's get this person out. You're seeing that happening today. If you take Uber, right? All the taxi guys are figuring out how to get Uber out of their hair. Correct? But on the other hand, if Uber had co-opted them, okay, perhaps it would have been easier. So they need to see a win opportunity in partnering, working with you. What are the dependencies? What does this mean? You know what, I'll build an app and I will integrate it with Facebook, right? And then it's all awesome. Because Facebook anyway has got 1 billion plus users, right? And then I'm all set. So I don't have to worry about anything. All I have to do is just get the Facebook integration done and I'm cool, right? Heard of a company called Zynga? Those of you who are into gaming and stuff? No? Farmville, you heard of Farmville on Facebook? Yeah, they were the guys who made Farmville. Very hot company once upon a time, went public, blah, 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 right? Zynga's core dependency was Facebook. We will sell only via Facebook, right? And then things tanked because Facebook then started changing the protocols and the policies that they would use. Net result, Zynga disappeared, right? For example, search. For example, the way in which you do advertising on Facebook, all that Facebook has to do is change its algorithm or change its publisher norms, you're out of business. So figure out where your big dependency lies and are you putting all your eggs in that one basket. And therefore, as the CEO, as the founder, what's your strategy? How do you get your business model de-risked? Okay? If you don't do that, several companies have collapsed. Sourcing and distribution, right? Where do you source from? How do you source from? Do you have multiple partners? Blah, 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 blah. Cost and all the rest of it. Right? Understand two fundamental principles. Access and usage are two very basic principles that you have to keep in mind at all times, right? And this holds true in any and every business. For example, take a club. You're a member of, let's say, a golf club, right? Access is hard. You need to know somebody. The cost of entry is very high, but the usage fees are relatively cheaper, right? Now you take the mobile phone business. Depending on who you are, you pay a low monthly access fee, right? Depending on who you are. If you're a teenager or if you're a senior citizen, etc. And then your usage, your pounds per minute or dollars per minute or rupees per minute varies, right? Depending on the usage patterns that you have. And this is true in every business. If you take Amazon, right? What is the product Amazon is selling? Who's Amazon's customer? Ever thought about it? Who's Amazon's customer? Sorry?
Publishing industry.
Publishing industry.
Everyone.
Everyone?
I don't know a single person in this room that has.
So just think about this, right? Who's a customer, first of all? Somebody who pays you money is a customer. Everyone else is an interested party, but not a customer, right? So what's the product Amazon is selling? Or let's take Google, for example. What's the product that Google is selling?
Can I just say, I don't know anyone in this room that hasn't used Amazon.
Sure.
So everyone in this room is a
Perhaps in this room, but not in the world. So it can't be everyone. So then that would be like anyone with a pulse.
They're targeting everyone.
They're trying to target everyone. The point I'm trying to make is, if you think about it, right? Who is the customer? What is the product? What is the access and what is the usage, right? Just keep these principles in mind. If you take Google, for example, what is the product Google is offering? No, you don't go to Google for advertising platform, yeah?
You search to endorse their brand.
Correct. So you go to Google to get some information that you're seeking, right?
You can ask about that.
Right. You are the product that Google sells to the advertiser, saying I now have so many billions of eyeballs or whatever it is, right? The advertiser pays Google. So Google's customer is the advertiser. What's the product? You. Is it, and it is free to you. So, and now what's the access fee you pay? Is there an access fee you pay to Google? Sorry? No, you're a visitor, right? Right? You pay an access fee if you include things like, storage and all of that, right? So they're working towards that model. Is there a usage fee for Google? It's your internet connection, right? So and now Google has launched its own Wi-Fi, it's launched a bunch of other things. They want to get a piece of that usage fee as well. So every company is thinking in terms of sort of managing these 3-4 crucial attributes that determine how their business model will get deployed.
Who's Amazon's customer? You didn't answer.
Sorry?
Who's Amazon's customer?
Yeah, who's Amazon's customer? Yes, please tell me. Who
You
pays?
said
So what's the product? Yeah, so what's the product that Amazon sells?
Distribution.
Convenience, right? Which means ease of delivery, right? Maybe a discounted rate, all of that. How does Amazon make all its money? Do you know? Amazon is a $78 billion company.
From the sellers.
$78 billion company, right? Where does most of its money come from? Ever thought about it? It doesn't come from books, by the way. It comes from the infrastructure that they deploy, what's called AWS. That's where it makes its money. Which means all the world's, not all the world's, a lot of companies use the Amazon infrastructure, and they include a lot of publishers, a lot of other businesses, the affiliate guys who use Amazon, right? They pay Amazon because what does Amazon do? It brings millions of people to the Amazon.com or .uk, whatever it is, right, site. And that's how it makes money, right? It may so happen that some of these millions buy from Amazon, but that's not how they make their money. You understand? So calibrating that is very crucial. Understanding how the money is made, what the usage access is, and so on, right? If you take Starbucks, for example, you don't go there just for coffee, right? You go there for the ambience, you go there for the experience, and just for hanging out and maybe getting free Wi-Fi. Product, right? This is fairly self-evident. All too often we work a lot trying to get the product to be as perfect as possible before we launch it, right? That's called feature creep. So you know what, just that one little thing I'll do, that'll be really awesome. Can you just delay everything by a day or maybe a week? Yeah, how often have you had that? Okay, and you find that before long, the market has run away from you, right? Speed is a very, very, very important part of execution, and therefore a very important part of every startup. A startup is built on speed, right? Can you do everything yesterday? That's the mantra in every startup, right? Too much money, yeah.
Just a quick question, will we get a copy of these slides?
Yeah, sure.
They're in the public domain.
What's that?
They're on the public domain.
They're in public domain. Are they in public domain? They are, right? No. Are these slides on public domain? Not yet. Yeah, you can get it. Okay? Too much money. And you'll find this, I've seen this in company after company. They've raised a truckload of money. Suddenly you find, brand new SUVs in the parking lot, right? Everybody's busy drinking mocha frappuccino with that whatever else thing, with that skimmed milk, whatever. And everybody's cool, right? Drinking organic tea, right? Walking with that extra jaunt, right? And they've forgotten the reason for their existence, okay? Because raising money is not an end. It's the beginning of a long process, right? Obviously, if you don't have too much money, you're in trouble. So the question is, how do you therefore calibrate your growth such that you're able to access whatever money is available, okay? And goes back to all the other things we talked about. Do you know how to manage cost? Do you even know what your cost is, right? Goes to the metrics, the unit economics. What's your path to profitability, right? And we'll talk about that, right? So all of these things are important. P2P is not peer-to-peer, but path to profitability. So if you're pitching to an investor, they'll say, okay, when do you hit break even? What's your revenue at that point? How much cash would you have burned by the time you hit break even? Right? Do you know that? How does your cost move? How will revenue scale? What's the incremental cost required to generate an extra unit of revenue? Yeah.
So Anderson Horowitz recently published a list of 16 metrics that could be globally used by organizations. But do you really coin your own metrics, or is it like a standard practice?
See, yeah. So these are all from their experiences, right? So don't. So that this is not a gospel, meaning, that you just have to do those 16. right? You have to understand context. You have to understand applicability, meaning what stage of company you are at, what kind of company you are. For example, if you're a restaurant, you don't follow all of those, right? So you have to understand those things. End of the day, cash is king. Okay? So very simply, you should know how much cash is getting out of your bank account every month, how much is coming in, and that is what will allow you to sleep well at night. Or you figured out some other way to ensure that you've got that comfort, okay? So understanding these metrics almost at a visceral level is crucial, because you can't keep standing there and say, someday we'll make money. Someday something good will happen to us, right? Because hope is not a strategy. Other reasons why you will collapse, right? It could be regulation. Suddenly some new act gets passed and you've not really thought about it. It's one of those entirely unexpected things, right? And you're done for. It could be litigation. Somebody alleges that, there's a patent that you have infringed upon, okay? Or some big company says, you poached my top engineers, and they'll take you to court. And as a young company, there's not a whole lot you can do. They say, my God, this is like too much, right? Market can melt down, right? 2008, I think we're still old enough to remember that, right? Then board challenges, very, very important, right? What's the chemistry at the board level? What do investors think of you? What do you think of investors? Or whoever else is on your board? Do you share information with them? Right? It's always a good idea, and it's an old saying in the startup world, share bad news first. Okay? Because everybody says, we're doing really well. Fantastic. Our sales went up, right? All our good stuff. And by the way, 4 of our engineers left last week. Right? Put the bad news out first. You got great ideas?
Yeah.
Awesome. Huh? So that's very important. So share the bad news part. Say, what? We are not going to hit our projections this month. We screwed up. Engineers have left. Customers started hating us. Whatever it is, right? Our supplier didn't deliver on time. Whatever. Share it. You build confidence and trust. Because what happens is, about 2 or 3 months in a row, if you don't hit your own projections, then your own credibility collapses. Says, why should I take you seriously? Because nothing that you have said has been met, right? And that's the beginning of the friction between employees and CEO, between CEO and the board, right? All of those things. It's always a bad idea to dance with an 800-pound gorilla, right? So in other words, understand when the big boys have suddenly taken an interest in your market space or in your kind of companies, because then suddenly you read in the newspaper, you open the FT and you see they've gone and acquired 4 companies similar to you, right? So is that a wake-up call for you? Time for you to pack up and go home or find another buyer? Or you say, I'm going to out-innovate these guys. Okay? So these are all things that you have to be very, very, very aware of and conscious of. Okay? Yeah, so thank you. Better, yeah? So like the good old Mark Antony from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, right? I pause now for your reply. If you have any questions, comments, observations, whatever. Yeah.
I'm Henry, CEO of Backtracker, which is a youth travel app. Our biggest challenge, I think, is product delivery. And
For travel app for what?
yeah, sorry. So what we allow users to share their journey and discover the journeys and experiences and suggestions of other users within the backpacking market, which is 30 million,
Yeah.
which is 30 million strong worldwide.
Yeah.
There's a team of 5 of us with 2 full-time developers, but still we find it hard to manage that timeline. So we're currently working with a work-in-progress model. But do you suggest any other procedures or processes?
So, yeah. See, I imagine. Yeah, what he's saying is he works for a company. He's the CEO of a company called Back Travel. What's it?
Backtracker. Which
Backtracker.
Users to share their journeys and discover their journeys and experiences of others. And our biggest challenge is product development, and because we're all under 23 years old, so we lack business experience. So we're looking for processes to put in place to speed up and make these processes more efficient.
See, I think the first thing I would ask you is, there would be a lot of other similar apps out there, right? So the question is, who actually is your customer? In other words, is it the backpacker in the UK who travels, let's say, across Europe? Is it the backpacker who goes to Latin America, Southeast Asia? Figure that piece out.
Yeah. We have a profile we're testing at the moment, which is 18 to 25-year-old females traveling in Europe, generally Australian and American, because we have an iOS app. Women use iOS more. And our strength is obviously Europe, because we're based in London.
We have an app company in India called Beyond Travels that basically does the same thing in Europe and in North America.
Yeah, there's one called Tripoto as well.
Tripoto's
So the point is, so there are quite a few of these apps, right, that are aimed at this backpacker, youth hostel, traveler crowd, right? The question for you is, have you had any of the members of your target group sit with you and work on the features?
Yeah, we work regularly with hostels themselves. We go into hostels weekly to talk to our target audience in a variety of countries as well, to get that diversity of opinion.
Yeah.
So we have the qualitative data on that side, and also we have the quantitative from
Do you have a product manager on the team?
myself, but I lack experience. We have mentorship to help with these procedures, but that's only been in the last month.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to talk to somebody who's in product management. I suspect that's the biggest problem, not in the actual coding or the development of the app, because you should first know what is it that you're building, for whom, in what time frame, because you may have a set of 100 features. You don't need all 100 to be built for you to release the product, right? What's now called the MVP, right? So what's that product that you have to build that gets it in front of your target audience in the shortest time, right? And so clearly, if you look at, let's say, any of the online travel companies, and if you can interest one of the product managers there, right, to kind of be an advisor or a mentor to your company, you know, perhaps with some stock or whatever, and have them advise you on what the UX capability should be, what the performance metrics ought to be, what kind of feature set makes sense. For example, do you need to integrate payment into the app itself, right? What are the other, let's say, content partnerships you might need to have? Because if I'm backpacking, let's say, in Europe, and I'm out in Prague, and this is my first time there, hey, you know what, do I go to a Lonely Planet? Do I go to Photos? Or how do I curate information and content that's relevant for me at a very personal level? You get what I mean? Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff you need to be able to work on, which means defining that product such that with the minimum amount of capital, you're able to get the first version out, because that's when you hit the trial.
Yeah, we're on our second version.
Yeah, so first version of the second version. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Yemisi Bokini. I'm a doctor by training.
I'm sorry, I'm a
medical doctor.
Medical doctor, okay.
So I have two questions. The first is your idea. Thank you. So the first is your views on the role of prior work experience in the success of a startup. And secondly, I can see some Steve Blank type sentiments in your presentation. So I'd like to get your view on the need for or the role of MBAs in the founding team or initial team. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So prior work experience is highly desirable. And what's important is, what have you learned from the prior work experience? In other words, have you been able to abstract learnings? Meaning, how do I look at a problem? How do I solve a problem? How do I get the right people to come on board? How do I communicate a vision to a market? How do I define, the value proposition? Things like that. Those are not function dependent. You can always get a functional expert who will help you. Obviously, you need to become more knowledgeable about the domain that you're operating in, but you need not be the expert. You can become, let's say, an expert over time. But starting out, do you know how to put together the right team around you, right? In other words, how do you communicate that passion, that vision, etc., etc.? Can you identify that pain point? Okay, so that is like one big thing. So the short answer to your question is, you don't necessarily need to be an expert, but yes, work experience is highly desirable. Second, with regard to MBAs, right? I don't know of any MBA in Silicon Valley who's built a successful company, meaning they've joined successful companies early on, okay? So just do a simple sort of rule of thumb, not rule of, a simple test from the UK, for example, right? Take a list of all the exciting startups, or make a list of 1,000 startups. How many of them have been started by MBAs? My guess is it's a really small fraction. MBAs are good at managing risk. They are not good at taking risk. You understand? That's where entrepreneurs come. You take Germany, for example, you take Japan, you take Korea, very, very few MBA types. And these countries don't value MBA anyway, right? MBA is a very distinct American thing. But you know, very rarely, for example, in Silicon Valley, will you find a bunch of 4 MBAs getting together and saying, good God, let's change the world. More often than not, they're 4 geeks. You get what I'm saying? It's not to discredit it, but that's just the way it is.
Thank you. Hi. My name is Nafis Bakar, and I'm trying to tap into the modest fashion industry.
What fashion?
Modest fashion.
Modest fashion, okay.
Through a social commerce site. And
okay.
Much like Henry, I'm 23. This is kind of the first proper thing I'm doing after I graduate. And the way I personally compensate for knowledge and skill gaps is through getting mentors.
Very good. Very good. Yeah.
So I wanted to know what else can I do to compensate for those knowledge and skills gap past that.
Yeah. So I think it's great that you've realized the gap and you put together a group of mentors, advisors, all of it. What I would suggest to you is, you know, whatever is meant by modest fashion, right? Make sure that your understanding is in consonance with the understanding of the market and of everybody else. You know, Socrates said the beginning of wisdom starts with definitions, right? So make sure that what you mean and what you want to achieve is understood by all, because many a time you'll find that there's a big gap. And once you get that, figure out who are the big players, the influencers, not necessarily brands, right? Who are big players in this space, right? For example, let's say if there is a marketing manager of a fashion house that kind of caters to the stuff that you're going after, the segment you're going after. Is there a way in which you can go and spend half an hour or an hour a month with that person and say, you know, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think, right? How do you reach out to these people? Use your existing networks, right? Leverage all of that. So it's very crucial that you keep expanding your spheres of influence, so to speak, right, in sort of concentric circles around you. And that's very important, because all of these, in essence, over time become advocates for your company. Because you know what, yeah, I met this very interesting company like 2 weeks back, and seems like they were doing something really cool, right? And they will casually mention this maybe at one event, or to a potential hire, or to somebody in a large company, right? So you need to constantly do that as the founder, to keep ensuring that, you know, you learn and others kind of have a vested interest, so to speak, in propagating, you know, your own, the fact that you exist. So that's your number one problem, because you won't get time of day otherwise. Correct? Yeah. Yeah, whoever has the mic wins, huh? Yeah.
So I'm Marianne, founder of Button, which is a digital clothes label which will tell shoppers information about the environmental and social impact of their garments. So from a B2B start-out perspective, there's kind of 2 potential routes which I'm deciding which would be better in terms of I could either associate myself firstly with a big customer like H&M and become more credible, or I could go down the route of working with smaller independent brands, putting up my product offering until I've got something that I guess works well in the market, and then propose it to a big brand. So I'm wondering at the start, which is the best of those two routes.
So what exactly is the product?
So it's a button tag with an NFC chip in it. So if somebody touches their phone on it and they can bring information about the environmental and social impact of their garments, which currently...
But why only environment and social impact? Why not more information?
Just because I'm very passionate about sustainability and climate change, and I feel like as an individual we can't access that kind of information on our products.
Yeah. So what I would suggest is, Marianne, see if you can add more value to that piece of content, because otherwise the segment you're catering to is really a niche to the already converted group. Okay? But there's a bunch of other information that you can embed in the chip.
Oh yeah, it's going to also tell care information about how to wash your clothing and sizing, and also about recyclability.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is not just the environmental and social impact, but it could be, let's say, country of origin, for example, right? And a bunch of other things, right? Yeah. And I guess the information is what? Is available on your phone?
Yeah.
So that's the way it comes?
From Apple or anything, it just comes up.
Got it, yeah.
Just along those lines, would you not say that if you're going down an MVP model route and the whole lean startup model, is it not better to actually stick with a niche of early adopters, power users, and then expand from there?
Yeah. Well, ideally yes, but the segment you're going after is not really a big segment, meaning how many people, let's say even if it were available in an H&M, would actually buy stuff based upon the environmental and social impact.
No, exactly. I don't think at the moment we're there at that stage, so that's why I'm aiming to actually replace the whole labeling system.
Exactly.
So at the moment, the material that we use is environmental.
Precisely, right. Is it organic, stuff like that. So the first thing is in kind of defining the product in a sort of a broader way, right? What that does immediately for you is it enhances the market that you can go after, whether it's an H&M or whoever else, right? Now, coming to your specific question, should I go and hang out with a big brand or should I go with the smaller guys, right? It's very hard to work with a big brand. It's very hard. And right now, your number one concern, if I'm right, is how to get into the market, right? In other words, can there be, let's say, 20, 30 stores where I can get quick deployment rather than fight for 18 months and talk to all the merchandising guys, the product guys, the technology guys at H&M, and then kind of start praying, right? So I would advocate that you go with the smaller guys, get the deployment, because one of the biggest things you will learn and get is you'll get feedback about what's working, what's not working, right? The so-called metrics that we are talking about. What does it take to deploy? For example, if there's a problem with the chip, what do you do? How do you replace it? What's the inventory that you need to keep, right? Is there a click-to-call element within an app itself if tomorrow you decide to do that? If a merchandiser has a problem, what does he or she do? You get what I mean? Yeah. So you will, if not iron out, you'll at least become aware of what the chinks in your armor are. And then that will start defining your strategy and approach going forward. Yeah?
So as a relatively new startup, which is growing predominantly well with an initial customer base in the B2B space, how do you ensure that you reach out to as many people as possible?
This is the last question. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. This will be our last session because then we're question because then we'll take a quick tea break and then continue on with our next session. Yeah.
So as a relatively new startup, which has started business and been able to achieve product market fit with an initial set of customers and revenue pouring in, how do you reach out to as many people as possible? And what is the most optimal channel of marketing, apart from the ones like digital marketing and word of mouth?
So that's a very unusual state to be in, right? You've got a product market fit and you've got revenues pouring in, right? I'm not sure how many companies can actually say that, which is a fantastic position to be in. He says he's got a B2B startup, which has achieved two very highly creditable things. Number one, he's got a product market fit and revenues are pouring in. Maybe he deserves a round of applause. So the question is, how do you therefore grow? Right? So who are your customers? The question is, can I now find 1 million of them? That's essentially a question, right? Okay. So first, do you know who these customers are? If it's B2B, for example, and you can define it. is there a chamber of commerce you can go and conduct a webinar for, right? So in one shot you've addressed, let's say 50, 100, 500, whatever number of members, right? So look for things like that. Who are the influencers in this space, right? So are there some big consulting companies that work there? Do they know about your existence, right? So you have to start doing stuff like that. Digital marketing by itself, unless it's a very kind of a different segment, won't work for this.
It doesn't guarantee conversion per se, because just
Yeah.
likes does not mean.
Sure. All right, thank you all very much.